Welcome to the First Customers Podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Paris Vega. With us today is Eli Packouz, inventor of 8 products, and the last product that he's working on now has raised $2.5 million in crowdfunding. And that product is called Instafloss. It's a product that can floss all your teeth in 10 seconds or less, which sounds insane. And we'll get to that product a little later on, but Eli, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
All right. So you've been involved with 8 different products, or you invented 8 products. Let's go back to your very first one and talk about how you got your very first customers.
Right. So before I actually was in the dental space creating Instafloss, I got my start. I was in college and my brother was a musician and he was a guitarist specifically, and he wanted a beat. However, drummers are very hard to come by, and drum sets are even harder to carry.
For sure.
So, we were looking into drum machines, but they were tabletop devices you needed to use your hands for. And of course, if you're using your hands, you can't use your guitar. And so we started asking musicians, and they were like, no, if there was any hands-free drum machine. And they were like, no, but when you find one, let me know because I want to buy it. And so we knew that we had to pursue it because of how much influence we had. And so we started posting, we started talking about stuff, and eventually we were on this music forum, and we got a lot of feedback and a lot of things like, oh, I wanted to do X, I wanted to do Y. And we really engaged with this community. We had no intention of using them for marketing. We just wanted to make sure that we were crossing our T's and dotting our I's, right. And listening to what more experienced people would want in a product. And lots of information. Actually, we didn't even.
So, were you already proposing an idea for a product to the community at that point in the Reddit forums?
Were you just okay. Yeah? This was actually wasn't even Reddit at the time. I'm not even sure if Reddit. How long is Reddit?
I don't know.
I don't know either. But anyway, it was a musician.
I got you.
Forum specifically. So we were engaging with this community, and we got a lot of information from them. We didn't really have any money at the time, but we managed to find an engineering firm that said that we could pay them when they completed the project rather than, as they go, which, we felt like that was something we could roll the dice on.
Yeah.
And then we launched on Kickstarter, and the community that we were on in our forum actually made it blow up, and it sort of went viral, took over. And then we were able to use that money, and we did some ads at the time and sort of snowballed it till we broke records.
Wow.
For most money raised for a musical accessory.
And what platform was that?
And that was
Kickstarter. Wow.
This was 2013. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So that was how I started my first company with my brother.
Wow.
We came out with multiple products after that. Now, for getting second customers and third customers is a little bit of a different story, but Our very first ones was just because we were asking some questions on the forum.
Wow. And did you sell anything before the Kickstarter launch, or was it actually launched through Kickstarter?
It was launched through that product was launched through Kickstarter, and people give you money in advance,
right.
And then it took us, I think, 8 or 9 months to deliver post launching on that campaign.
Interesting. And is there like a timeline or like a due date that you have to follow or anything when you use Kickstarter to launch something?
Well, you have to give your estimates, and then almost no company ever meets their estimates. And the good ones manage to fulfill at some point. Well, you are required to give a monthly update.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. And so from that product, what did you launch next?
So then we went into a whole bunch of different arrays of musical space, mostly in pedals. We came up with a looper. We came
Okay.
up with a cable organizing thing. We have also in the software space for beat creation and organization.
Was this all
But
within the
then
same company?
that was all in the same
Yeah.
company. Yeah. So me and my brother, we started once we had the initial success, we were able to roll that into more
Right.
products and more customers and more channels,
And so
etc.
you're kind of selling to the same audience, staying in that niche of different music kind of devices.
Yes, that was
Yeah.
all pro musicians, super advanced
Yeah.
people.
That's cool.
Um, but they that is a super niche audience, and I'm a growth junkie, and I'm always constantly thinking of new products. And in 2017, I just couldn't get it out of my head, a device that could floss all your teeth for you. I was with my brother. We were late for a meeting, and we were trying to floss, and it was just taking forever. And then within like the next 3 weeks, like 6 different people came up to me and be like, "Hey, you make products. Can you just make something that flosses my teeth for me?" And I knew that was going to be, like the biggest thing ever, because everybody has teeth. Everybody ought to floss. They all know they should. Nobody wants to, but they would if it was easy.
Mm-hmm.
So I started doing research. I started buying periodontal textbooks and reading like, what is flossing? What is this? I started downloading every scientific article I could find that was published on flossing. I started reading them all. And then eventually I had a concept of like, okay, I learned that water flossing is more effective than string flossing because water can remove more plaque. It can get deeper underneath the gum lines. It can clean 360 degrees around the tooth that string can't do.
Okay.
It can prevent gum recession and gingivitis far better than string. However, the problem with water flossers is that they take even longer than string. And the number one complaint about flossing is that it takes too long.
Right.
So so they take the number one complaint and make it worse. So it's like, okay, what can we do if we can make the number one complaint better? So my concept was, instead of just one manual jet that you have to trace your gum line, to do multiple jets that engulf multiple areas of your mouth that move from one side to the other, and then we can floss everything with 100% coverage, 100% accuracy in 10 seconds.
Okay, that makes sense.
And that's when I knew that I had to start a second company.
Okay, so that was a little out of the music niche, a little broader. Okay, so what's the new company?
So the new company, is the DBA is Instafloss.
Okay.
And in 2017, when I started it, I knew I needed. So like, I'm a technical product manufacturing guy, but I needed expertise on my side to make up for my gaps, to make sure, just like when we were going to the forum in the beginning, making sure that like, hey, pro musicians, is there anything that we need to know? I need to know that, like, okay, yeah, I've read probably every study published on flossing in the last 50 years, but I need to make sure that there's nothing I'm missing. So I partnered with Dr. Ralph Roud and Dr. Anna Mascarenhas. Dr. Anna Mascarenhas is the chair of the American Dental Association Council of Scientific Affairs. And so I showed them my schematics, and Dr. Mascarenhas gave a plan of how to test it to make sure that it was actually effective. Because if you could floss in 0 seconds if you don't care about the results. So it's only a 10-second floss if you're actually getting good results. Gotcha. So we started flossing. We actually started flossing pigs at first. Eventually we graduated to humans.
Really?
And I'm proud to say that after 5 years of research and development, we created a product that can floss your teeth better than the group who are manually doing it.
Wow. Okay. So, and I'm guessing, so you built several products under the other company. Seems like that company was probably successful, so that gave you the funds to pour into this deep type of research, right?
Yeah, 5 years of R&D.
Yeah, that's a lot, right? But I guess you have to have that amount of time just to get actual data, enough to make claims that you're trying to make here.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. Way more than you would think, and way more in any music tech product.
Right. Okay, so because that's kind of a new angle that I don't know if we've talked about much. What does it cost even to do like a research study? Like, what's that rough estimate? I know it depends on what you're doing, but
yeah, so it really depends on what you're doing. It's like, That's really tough to say, because what are you looking for? How large is the magnitude? The more subtle of a thing you're looking for, the more people you're going to need to be able to parse that apart. If you're trying to see, if let's say you're developing a vaccine and you want to know, does this cause a problem in like 1 out of 100,000 people,
Yeah.
because it's a drug, that's very different, especially since, like, even if you have 100,000 people, there's no guarantee you're going to have one and that's going to be statistically
Right.
representative
Right.
of whether that's one or two. So it's a very, very different situation. The other thing that makes it complicated is whether or not you're doing it in-house or whether you're doing third party. Now, if you're going to be presenting to investors or the consumer, you definitely want it done third party, and that could be super expensive. Hundreds of thousands of dollars just for like a trial with 30 people. But if you're doing in-house stuff because you're making iterations on your engineering, right? Let's say you're doing some engineering prototypes and you want to know, okay, do I need to go in this direction with the prototype or that direction with the prototype? Then you don't need to do a third-party study. You could do an in-house study. That's significantly cheaper. It's as cheap as you can manage to make it yourself.
Okay. So how many people did you end up including in your studies?
So people, 30.
Or pigs to start with.
Yeah. And the thing is that gave us enough data to know that we're actually reducing periodontal pockets, we're reducing plaque, we're doing all the things that we're supposed to do.
Okay.
But we still had to then manufacture it, which cost, like, yes, I had a business from before that enabled me to do the research,
Yeah.
but it didn't enable me to go to market. And the molds alone were like $1 million to create the molds for the device, let alone to create the actual device.
Right.
So that required more funds than I actually had spare. So I actually returned to crowdfunding again to funnel that. And this time, it wasn't just based off of a forum, because with a crowdfunding campaign, success breeds success, failure breeds failure. If you don't make a big splash on day one, you're going to be bumped to the bottom of the rankings. No one's going to find you. You're not going to get any traction. You want to be at the top of the list, and then so people can find you and keep you at the top of the list, right? You want to keep that ball rolling. So it's very important that on the first day you actually open with a lot of orders. So in order to do that, we spent time building a mailing list. And one of the big problems with mailing lists is that, if you don't have high engagement rates, Google tends to punish you. They put you in the promotions tab. And even if you're sending people emails, it doesn't really help you unless they're reading them, unless they're engaged. So we had a rule that we would never let any email go unresponded. So if we would write stuff in a way to elicit a response. So when a person signed up, we'd like, thank you for signing up. We're trying to solve your problems with flossing. What do you hate most about flossing? Open up with a question. A lot of people would respond, and then we would respond back to them. And then if they would respond back to us, we would not let it go. Yeah. And what this does is it shows Google that you are an engaging, this is not spam, this is not promotion. Right. And what we would then do is we would post blogs with our updates and ask for specific feedback from our community. And this got more engagement and more back and forth, and people feel like they're involved. They are involved. Right. We actually have taken, their suggestions into account, and it gets you out of the promotions. And then when we launched, we had a incredibly high engagement rate, and we raised $2.5 million in pre-orders.
That's awesome.
So we're able to use that to start the molds and to start getting production. And I'm talking to you right now from Guadalajara, Mexico, where we're manufacturing, and we just shipped our first units last week.
That's awesome. Okay, so yeah, I hear that a lot of manufacturing is moving to Mexico. For years, it seemed like everybody thought everything was made in China, and then a lot of issues, maybe partly pandemic, supply chain. I know there's been manufacturing in Mexico, but it seems like that's even more of a push now, because it's like, hey, if we can keep it on the same continent, there might be some usefulness there.
There are many advantages. Yeah. which I'm happy to get into if anyone's, manufacturing nerd.
Yeah.
But
Oh, that's cool. All right. And so did you have to raise any other additional investment or bring on any investors or partners to get this? Okay.
yes, we've raised, in addition to the 2.5 million pre-orders, we've raised 1.3 million in funding from different sources at different times, not all at
Yeah.
once. And it was necessary because it's been a 5-year process. The molds alone cost $1
Yeah.
million. To build the devices are very expensive. So it was a very capital intensive process, and I don't know exactly how well I would have fared if this was my first company
Right.
instead of my second. Definitely learned a lot. Still learning a lot,
Yeah.
but
Can you talk a little bit about selling to the investors? Because that's kind of like a type of customer in itself,
yeah, that's a whole can of worms. That's like it's a very different sell.
Mm-hmm.
The investors are people who will put money into your business as long as you can guarantee that you don't need it. so,
Yeah.
uh, my advice would be that if you can avoid it, avoid it, because not because taking investment is in of itself bad, but because the more you can do without the investment, the stronger position you're going to be in. And which is how you should be thinking anyway, because if someone's going to give you money, I want to know that you're a person who can take that money and really make it stretch, really do something with it.
Right.
You're not just relying on the cushion. But so for our very first investors, they were super skeptical, and we were like, hey, just come into the office and try the prototype. And they're like, okay, fine. I'll do that. I'm curious enough to check it out. And as soon as they tried it, that's when, I could just see the light in their eyes, like, okay, they're going to invest. So definitely it helps if you already have your product, if at least a prototype of your product.
Right.
Now, granted, this was not the version that we had done a lot of scientific testing on because we needed the money to get there, but we had the basic build down and the basic pressures down. And honestly, we actually didn't really change much other than being able to make it more compact and less manufacturable. But the fundamentals were there for the prototype, and they enjoyed the feeling. They felt clean, and they're like,
Okay.
okay, this because a lot of times when you tell someone something that's seemingly revolutionary, you're like, oh, we could floss all of your teeth in 10 seconds. They're like, no way. Yeah, if I do a really lazy job, I'll do it in 10 seconds.
Yeah.
It's almost a negative because you say something so positive. The only way they can make it sense of that
Right.
is if it's crappy.
Yeah.
Right? Because otherwise, why hasn't anyone done
Yeah.
it?
We'll wash your car in 10 seconds. It's like, well, probably not,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. They're like, oh, okay, yeah, probably a lot. And I mean, honestly, I would be in the same mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Like if somebody came to me and was like, oh, I have a workout machine
Yeah.
that, can, build muscle as much as you would do in an hour in 10 seconds, I'd be like, yeah, right. Like, this is probably total crap. And in most cases, you're probably right. Investors are people, and probably the number one thing you have to understand about them is that they get hundreds of emails a day. If you're in, there's the ratio of people who want money to people who have money and are willing to invest it is tremendous. So, so they're very skeptical, and anything you can do to get ahead of that, any traction you can show that you've made, like honestly, do as much as you can to be able to leave as little as possible to the imagination of the investor, because when they're imagining stuff, they're just going to imagine all the bad stuff.
Right.
So you have to get ahead of that.
Okay. And you didn't have the study data yet when the investors, but you had a prototype that they could try.
So we had a prototype, and I had very compelling reasons to argue from a scientific perspective why the prototype was going to do well in the studies.
Okay.
And those reasons were that each individual jet of the prototype was the equivalent of a jet of a product that's on the market, and for which there's 50 years of scientific data. So I said, okay, you see this one jet in the device, this one jet is equivalent of this jet, and here's 50 years worth of scientific studies on this jet. So now this jet from these last 50 years, you had to manually trace. You can see in our device that we do it automatically, and we get 100% of the gum line and the tooth area. So therefore, here's a pile of data on teeth sizes and gum line differentials. And so and here's our device. So you can look at this data. You can see that we cover over 98% of the population. You can see that in the device, you can see that it covers 100% of the area. And for each individual jet, you can see that there's 50 years worth of data that these jets are more effective than string. So yes, we need to do human trials, but like, if you're going to human trials, like not really sure of how it's going to go, you probably need to do some more research beforehand, because otherwise it's going to be a very expensive research
I got
process.
you. So you shouldn't necessarily do a trial if it's purely for discovery, like from a business sense. You want to have a good idea that you're on the right track before you just go blowing money on a bunch of studies to be your kind of own source.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. That seems like something that you could sell the dentist or something. You know what I mean? It seems like, hey, you got to come to the dentist office to get your dang pressure wash of your teeth or something. But okay, so this is a consumer level device though.
This is a consumer device, yes.
Okay.
For daily at home use. Now, there's no reason you can't use it in the dental office.
Right.
But like, if we were to invent like a toothbrush that did something similar, why would we? There's a lot more people than dentists.
Yeah.
And also, like, flossing your teeth once every 6 months is not as effective as doing it every day.
For sure.
So I highly recommend you do use it daily. Yeah. So therefore, you're not going to go to the dentist every day.
Right.
So therefore, it makes more sense to do it on the consumer level.
And you said you had a doctor who partnered up with you or a dentist who partnered up with you to help?
Two doctors. Yes.
Okay. So do you see it as something where dentists are supportive and want their clients, or is it like, hey, they're taking away business? They're not going to need as much dental work with the Instafloss.
So, I mean, I definitely have heard that like accusation many times that like, oh, dentists hate this one weird trick. However, I've never met a dentist who's actually expressed that to me. Maybe they hold that view privately.
Yeah.
But every dentist I've ever talked to is actually, when I mentioned the device, they're actually like, yes, finally something people will actually do, because I tell people to floss and they're like, yes, I will, or I do, but they don't. Actually, there's two major problems with the consumer flossing habits. The bigger one is that they don't floss enough. 70% of Americans regularly skip flossing. And the number one reason they give is that it takes too long. So if you're a dentist and you're trying to get people to do it, you need to solve their pain points. Why aren't they doing it? What can we do to solve that? That's one of the areas that Instafloss steps in. But the other one, which is a smaller percentage, but actually in my mind just conceptually way more frustrating, is that of those who floss, the vast majority are flossing incorrectly. You could look at the scientific studies where they take people and they put them into three groups. One group doesn't floss. The second group flosses at home. And the third group comes into a dentist's office every single day and is flossed by a dentist. The difference between the professional floss and the consumer floss is astounding. And so this gives us a pretty good indication that the majority of people, even if they're putting in the effort, are not doing it correctly. They're missing areas, they're doing bad technique, they're not, many issues. And that could also perhaps be part of the feedback loop where people are like, oh, well, there's no difference when I floss or when I don't floss, so why should I do it? And so we were trying to address both of those head on. Number one is, why don't you do it in the first place? And when you do it, why don't you do it right? And of every dentist I've talked to who understands how we've accomplished this, they're actually pretty excited because, maybe this is crazy, but I think they actually want what's best for their patients.
Yeah. I think that's probably true in most industries, where even though there'll be bad like representations in the media or claims that are made, that most professionals want what's best for their clients. So that seems like,
I'm sure there's scumbags out there. And even if it's 1 out of 100, that's still like so many that
Yeah.
there could be articles and YouTube videos
Yeah.
and on. So
Like give it out.
I just don't have the data.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Giving out candy at the end of the dentist session. Here, suck on this hard candy now that you've had your teeth cleaned. Okay, cool. Let's see. Is it instafloss.com?
That's correct. Like an instant floss, instafloss.com or Instagram, but Instafloss.
I'm going to share my screen with those watching on YouTube or Spotify. Any listeners, you can switch over to there to see the product actually here. And anybody who's not watching, I just want you to know that our brother Eli here has some big bright white teeth on display. So he's advertising the effectiveness, I think, of Instafloss in person here.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Do you use it yourself? You're using the product?
Yes, I do. Actually, in the very beginning, before we even did human studies, I was using it on myself so often that my gums started to hurt because it's very rare. So like it's very common for people to underfloss. It's relatively rare for people to overfloss, but I was doing so many experiments on it that I was doing the equivalence, because every 10 seconds with Instafloss is the equivalent of 2 minutes with a regular floss.
Whoa.
So if I'm doing it for 3 minutes a day, that's 180 seconds. That's 36 minutes of flossing. That's nuts. That's crazy to floss for 30. And sometimes I do it for 6 minutes. That's over an hour of flossing a day,
Yeah.
So, I started getting like soreness and problems. And, I went to the dentist. He's like, you're over flossing. You need to stop this. So it actually influenced the product design, because one thing I didn't think that overflossing was ever going to be a problem. So what we built into it was after 10 seconds, it does an auto shut off and like blinks a light at you. So at least that was a full floss. Now we can't stop you from doing this forever.
Right.
But we could at least inform you that was enough.
Mm-hmm.
And if you choose to do it 36 times in a row, at least I hope the lawyers would agree that at that point it's on.
Right. Okay, that's really cool. I wasn't sure. I hadn't seen the actual product yet. So now looking at the site, that clarifies what you're talking about. So you do manually, like you move it around your mouth, similar to how you'd move a toothbrush around your mouth, and the water sprays out.
So you move it from one side to the other.
Okay.
But because of the way that it's
it does top
shaped,
and bottom.
So
I see.
It does top, bottom, front, and back.
Right.
So it does 4 quadrants at once. And the advantages here is that water jets are actually most effective at a 90-degree angle. And if you're manually aiming that's really difficult, especially on the inside of your mouth. Like you try to go on the inside and get it at 90-degree angles, practically impossible. And that's actually where we saw the most improvement in our studies, because that's really hard to do manually. And that's where people mess up the most, is the gum line on the inside, the tongue side of their mouth. So this does 4 quadrants at once at a 90-degree angle. And another problem people have is they'll skip over areas. But when you move this from one side to the other, the jets, because there's so many jets, they assure that no area is missed. So you don't miss areas, and it's always done at the 90-degree angle.
So it looks like 4 jets on the front and then 3 jets in the back of the teeth on both top and bottom. Okay. Cool. Yeah, you see how that would really, but it's not uncomfortable as far as like the amount of pressure, the water.
The pressure is adjusted.
Okay.
So the idea is that if it hurts, it's too high for you at the moment. You should do it to the point, I think that the maximum pressure that you can handle comfortably is probably your best bet.
Okay. Interesting. So is that part of the testing where you had to figure out, it's like, oh, we're blasting holes in people's gums, we got to lower the pressure, or, that's not even taking dirt off, we got to raise the pressure?
Well, actually, luckily, that was a part of the last 50 years of research done on the manual devices. Is there's some good data out there as terms of what is the maximum pressure the gums can withstand, how much pressure is needed to remove plaque and to disturb the biofilm underneath the gum line to improve the health of your gums. Okay. So we were actually able to piggyback off of that research. There's so many studies out there regarding water flossing. The issue is that they require manual aiming, which is very time consuming, and most people don't do it right.
So I guess maybe one of the main competitors that you're kind of replacing is that, like, I've heard of that, like Waterpick brand, that kind of thing, where it's that single stream kind of thing. That's what you're talking about when you're saying the manually aimed.
Yeah, they are a major brand for doing the manual tracing, the time consuming manual tracing.
And this, you just go across all your teeth back and forth. And is it like one big sweep, or you just going back and forth?
Just one sweep. One sweep. You don't have to go back and forth. You just go one time in 10 seconds and you're done. Wow. So it's 12 times faster.
Okay.
And considerably, depending on your use, how you use the manual version, can make sure you don't miss any areas and do it correctly.
Okay. All right. And this almost seems like it's one of those where it kind of sells itself once you invest in, all the technology and then all these nice visualizations that you have on the website that clearly explains. But this doesn't replace regular brushing, right? Is this
this is for flossing.
Specifically
just for brushing.
Okay. So after you brush, a little 10-second Instafloss and you're good.
I'd recommend flossing before you brush, just so that way the toothpaste can get to areas
they
may have difficulty otherwise.
Really?
But that just if I'm going, look, as long as you do it, you're miles ahead of other people.
Yeah, we need to get Eli Packouz's teeth regimen here documented.
But if I'm going to recommend one over another, which is a question that we get, there is a marginal benefit to flossing before.
Really? Interesting. Okay. Try that out. That makes sense, though. Getting all the good benefits of the toothpaste into the... Okay. All right. So getting the website together and all that, you were saying you have to hit with a splash on the different platforms, like Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like is this how you've launched all your products? You ended up doing it through Kickstarter each time just to take the advantage?
No, just the first one, of my first company, and the first one for Instafloss.
Really? So you just use your existing target audience for your following products for your last company?
Yeah, you're kind of in a different stage. I know some people who, even as the company matures, they continuously launch on Kickstarter. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with that. I've avoided it just because it's a lot more effort to sell on Kickstarter than it is on Amazon or on an e-commerce site. Like, if you have product available, the amount of effort you have to do to get a sale is so much less. Like, people think like, oh yeah, I'll do a Kickstarter, it'll be easy. Like, no, take however hard it is to sell something when you have inventory, and then try telling people that, like, hey, this is going to be 3 years until you get it, and you might not even get it, and there's not one single review out there, and no one's ever had it but you, and we have an early stage prototype. We're not really sure how it's going to look in the end. See how quickly that kills your sales. It's really difficult to do the Kickstarter route, but if you do it, there's a number of advantages, which is that you could get your money earlier, which you can use to develop, so you can get to market when you otherwise wouldn't have. And I think that if you can succeed there, you can succeed almost anywhere.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's a good litmus test to know whether or not something's going to be successful on the wider market.
Are people passionate enough to give their money to you a year in advance? If not, maybe you have the wrong product.
Okay, and so if so that makes sense why you waited for a new product to go back to Kickstarter, because that kind of helps prove the new idea. Whereas if you had that after the new product, then you've got an existing customer base and you know that you can sell more products to them. All right.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot more sense financially on like a dollar per dollar basis, where if you could just make your product and then have it available on Amazon, you'll make a lot more money than trying to convince people, because that your conversion rate is going to be so much lower. But if you don't have the money to go on Amazon and make your product, you have to do what you have to do.
Gotcha. And so you can just email out to your existing email list. For example, if you come out with another accessory or whatever for Instafloss, you just hit up your email list and put it on your store or whatever, and there it is.
we could hit up our email list, or, if we're already making money, like we're on the market with one product, we can use the money from that first product to develop a second product. We don't have to tell anyone about it until it's actually ready.
Right.
And then we could just go on Amazon or start advertising and saying 2-day shipping or something like that. And that's much easier
Right.
than saying like, hey, we have a concept for a product that will be available in a few years. Would you like to give us money now?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Are there any types of issues people might have who can't use your product? Any kind of like oral conditions or whatever?
So if you have significant like ulcers on your
Ooh,
gums,
okay.
you need to talk to a dental provider about that, because you're going to actually need to very carefully avoid that. If you have stitches,
Ooh.
if you've had jaw surgery and your jaws it's wired shut, then you can't fit the device in
Sure.
your mouth, and you can't fit almost anything in your mouth.
Right.
Actually, you have to like eat through a straw. And actually, what they do for those cases is they use a very strong antibiotic oral rinse.
Okay.
But it's effective. It saves people's teeth while they're recovering from jaw surgery.
Okay.
So situations like that, where if you believe that you are in any significantly abnormal situation, then you should talk to your dental
Sure.
provider. You may need more specialized equipment for a more specialized case. However, Instafloss will probably cover 98% of people.
What about people with braces? Is it wide enough to cover?
Yeah, and braces are no
Okay.
problem, actually. That's one of the advantages, because the water jets can get through and around brackets, no problem.
Awesome.
It saves a lot of time, actually. They're a prime candidate for wanting flossing to go faster.
Right, because they've got way more nooks and crannies in there to deal with.
Mm-hmm. They need it more, too.
Okay, because you have more places for things to get stuck, right?
Yeah. Hideouts.
Yeah, really. Okay, and so now you've got your pre-orders, and you said you built up an email list first for this one.
Yes.
What other strategies are you using now to get more customers now that you're kind of in the process of shipping the product? What's that plan to keep getting more customers?
So actually, right now we're not advertising because we have a backlog of Instafloss orders that we have to fulfill first. Once we fulfill those and then have inventory, we don't want to start our advertising campaign until we have inventory and can do 2-day shipping, because it's just so much harder to say like, hey, order now, get it in 12 weeks,
Yeah.
And it's going to influence the type of people that you're advertising to, because it's a different demographic of people who don't care versus people who are, your more typical customer. And we don't want that to influence being like, oh, we have it in our head that these sort of advertisements work and these sort of advertisements don't work, when in reality, that's very audience specific. So we want to wait until we have a regular audience. And that should be soon, because we're ramping up production right now as we speak. Actually, I don't know when this will be published, so maybe by the time this is published. So the next step is video, especially 1-minute video. The sort of bite-sized stuff is really where it's at right now, and that's going to be, it's like so time consuming. We have to treat videos like Skittles. There has to be like a new one popping every minute. But that's how you pull people in right now on so many platforms. Also, influencer marketing.
I was going to ask.
We've identified a number of people. We're always identifying more people who could potentially influence their audiences. However, where that's just for like the e-commerce, pushing it, getting it to market, making an initial burst of sales. But in long term, this is a much more long-term strategy, but where most of our conversions probably will come is people who go to their dentist and they don't floss enough, and the dentist needs to know about our product and needs to recommend it. So on our timeline of going to market is dental outreach and talking to dental providers and providing them with the product, and then giving it to them at a discount so they could sell to their directly there at their office. Actually, we're in talk with some dental providers right now who are very excited to receive their units.
That's awesome.
And So that's a whole thing. It's an expensive process because you have to educate so many people,
Right.
before you start seeing a trickle of results.
So that seems like,
but it's important.
right. It's more like a lead gen campaign. It seems like trying to get dentists interested, and so you're putting ads out there just to get some kind of warm leads to come in.
Exactly. Or we'd work through an agency that visits dentists and goes to lunch with them and tells them about all the new stuff, which of course is money up front. And so it is a very lead gen thing. And in order to afford that, we need to be able to, be pulling money in from the e-commerce and then reinvesting it in the dental education program. So it all ties together.
And are you trying to get into any like big box kind of stores to where people can just go to, Walmart or Target or whatever and just buy it off the shelf?
So eventually that is how you reach the most people, but we're not doing that initially. And I would caution anyone who is in a similar situation to also hold off on that initially, because once you're in stores, it is very hard to modify anything because you have contracts. Contracts last for a certain period of time. And so if you want to modify anything, you're like, oh, we were doing an experimentation on the color of the box, and we found out that this color outperforms the other color. Well, once you have a retail contract, you can't change that. You can't modify anything. And so you want to make sure that you know exactly, well, you want to scale something good. Get it 100% right and then scale it,
optimize
rather than scaling it and then trying to change what you've already scaled. If you're going to copy paste something, make sure that you got that one thing right. So we're doing a lot of A/B testing, or we will be doing a lot of A/B testing on e-commerce, with messages to dentists, and so on. And then we're going to use that to influence the retail stores. And the thing is, the retail stores also have the lowest margin. So if you're going to be bottlenecked in production, you want to be selling where you have the highest margin. So there's multiple reasons to only go to big box retail when you are truly ready for it. Mm-hmm. When you've already done all your A/B testing, when you've already ironed out every bottleneck in the production process, so that way you can scale smoothly. Like if you're trying to fulfill a Costco order and then that you have bottlenecks in production, now Costco's mad at you and you haven't fulfilled to anyone in e-commerce, you're in trouble.
Right. How do you test something like box color without being in a physical store? Are you literally just saying like, hey, this box color we used in this ad kind of, you know what I mean? Like using ad photography?
Right, okay. Right. So you could be in smaller stores before you go to retail stores. Gotcha. That would actually be the way to do it. But if you're not, I wouldn't really recommend trying to get the data in a different platform. Don't but however, what you could do is you could see what do people care about most? Do they care about the fact that the floss is effective, that the floss is quick, that the floss is painless? The fact that they're going to look beautiful, or the fact or the fact that they're going to be healthy. These are things, and then you can see what converts people, and that could really influence your decision on what to experiment with on the box. Okay. And then you experiment on the box in a smaller store, and then you use those results to go into a bigger store.
That's really cool. Yeah, I love like physical products. And fascinated by the marketing, like manufacturing marketing and product marketing, because it's like you get to see how it flows throughout the entire supply chain. And like, because I spent a lot of time on the digital marketing side, the digital mm-hmm. ads, and that's cool to see how you're taking that data and letting it influence what you're doing on the physical packaging and product. That's really neat.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hybrid world, really.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Do you manufacture? Are you still part of the original music-related company?
Only on the board. I spend as little time as possible.
Yeah. And did you guys manufacture everything in Mexico for that company as well?
No, we manufactured everything in China, and this time I decided to go with Mexico.
Okay.
For a number of reasons. It was price equivalent. We were able to produce things quicker. And we're able to, because it's closer to the United States, we don't have to go across oceans, so we can cut down on our production time.
Yeah, so the shipping cost is way cheaper, right?
And the shipping time, which means that let's say you need to take out a loan to finance your inventory. If you're not going to get your inventory, let's say it takes you 3 months to make it, and if it takes you 2 months to ship it, you need a loan for 5 months. But if it takes you 3 months to make it and 2 weeks to ship it, because you can just put it on a truck and it's right there to your main market, then you don't need a loan for as long. So it really cuts down on your cash flow forecast requirements.
Okay. And is Mexico catching up like on the electronic side of manufacturing? Because that's what I've heard before. Like, China's just so optimized for certain types of electronics manufacturing. But I guess you've got some electronic components here in this device.
Yeah, I mean, actually, to be honest, even in my previous company, the most advanced electrical components came from the United States.
Really?
We would order them from a factory in the United States, ship them to China, and have them assembled into larger electronic components. But because like the United States is still like the king in terms, I guess, and Taiwan in terms of making, especially microchips.
Right.
So for those parts, so we do have American-made parts in the unit, also in the previous company, in all physical electrical units. We had American-made parts. However, regarding the other, like the control boards and stuff like that, we've had no problem in Mexico. In fact, they've taken some looks at the designs of some designs that were engineered by our Chinese counterparts. They had quite a few modifications and improvements. Another thing is every engineer, I think this is pretty universal, is going to think that every other engineer's work needs improvement. Yeah. That's something you're going to find no matter where you go. But yeah, no, it's been a wonderful experience.
Now, I know there's been a big push, like in the news, like politically, with the current administration talking about, hey, more American-made, American-sourced everything. From your perspective as a serial manufacturer and entrepreneur, how feasible do you think it is to actually like fully manufacture a product in the U.S.? Is it just going to always be you got to lean on some of these other countries? Is it possible to manufacture a device like yours in the U.S. and have it within any kind of reasonable price range?
At the moment, no. If we were to try to make this device in the United States, as the United States currently stands, then it would be at least 3 times more expensive.
Wow.
Which means, we would have to raise our prices significantly, which means we'd be serving a much smaller, much richer population. Our device would only be able to be afforded by very rich people.
Right.
And they exist, and I'm not saying it wouldn't be a infeasible business move. However, so we can't do that at the moment. Theoretically, there are things that could change that calculus.
Okay.
If automotive technology really improves, if the United States has a lot more immigration, and there's people who are willing to work at different rates. But oftentimes you get that as like hand in hand. It's like, in order to protect domestic workers, we need to both not allow foreign manufacturing and immigration. So it's like, then there's only leaves automation, and automation may catch up eventually, and then that should make it equivalently cheap to manufacture anywhere.
Because the main lever is the cost of the human labor. That's the main knob that needs to be turned one way or the other.
It's not the only thing, but it bleeds into everything else, because it's like, even if you get let's say you get components and then you assemble them. Well, okay, these components were cheaper in China, but why were they cheaper in China? Right. And there's multiple things that influence price. One is the hourly rate, but other things are like, economies of scale or closeness to sourcing or shipping or things like that. However, those can all be modified. And so what you're left with as a large component is the cost of labor.
Okay. Been listening to a lot of Peter Zahon, if you're familiar with that guy. He talks about different advantages or disadvantages of different countries economically based on their geography and ability to ship and interact and do business with each other. And so he talked about how Mexico is growing and becoming a manufacturing powerhouse more and more, and that it's more competitive with China. over these past 10 years or so, especially. So that's interesting that you guys went from first manufacturing over there to now your next project manufacturing.
Yeah, we're part of the data of that switch.
That's cool to see. All right, man. Well,
there has to be people in there, that when you see trends changing, those are real people, and we're part of those real people.
For sure. This has been really cool, man. I appreciate you sharing your time and your story with us. Maybe you could speak to one, potential customers, last pitch on, why they should use your product, but also other entrepreneurs out there who are wanting to start a product, who've got an idea, maybe a few little quick tips on how to go about pursuing that idea.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that number one, you want to make sure that you're solving a real problem. There are too many times when people give me their pitches that they're really a product in search of a problem rather than a problem in search of a solution. It's just because, understandably they want to make money, but they didn't approach it from a problem solving lens primarily. So if you have to make sure that people are really want your product, then I think you definitely need to read, because there's so many aspects to what it takes to go from the light bulb moment to actually going to markets, that I can't focus just on one. Because okay, after you get the light bulb moment, you have to know, okay, does this actually work? Because, you might have an idea that's not feasible. So you have to build basic prototypes, and that will tell you a lot, before you even pursue your idea and oh, I'm going to raise money and I'm going to tell engineers to build this. Be like, well, try making a basic version yourself and see if it does what you think it will do. Maybe it behaves very differently. And that would influence your patents, because the patents are from a mechanical perspective, not a conceptual perspective. You can't say I'm patenting a device that solves this problem. You have to patent a mechanism. And if you start going through the patent process before you've actually figured out your mechanisms, there could be a lot of things that you're either not patenting or patenting the wrong things. You're not realizing the workarounds. So definitely get your prototype first. Once you have a product, okay, I like this, it works, then do your patent searches, get your patents if possible. Now, that may require money. So you may have to start raising money. Avoid it if you can. Do it if you must. It's better to have part of something than 100% of nothing.
Right.
And then see if you can start developing it and going to market with it. And for each one of those steps, I feel like you should read a book on every step. You should read a book on to understand the context of the product that you're making. What else is out there, to understand the niche that it's in. Then you should read something on patents and how to go about it. You should read a book on raising capital. You should read a book on team building. You should read a book on going to market and marketing. And if you're not willing to do that, then just don't do this. It's
yeah. Can you recommend one of those books? You mentioned different types. Is there one maybe that stands out? I know that you talked about different parts of the process.
Yeah. So I think the one that I think, and the reason I'm recommending this one is because I think that of all areas that I see entrepreneurs lacking the most intuitively, because people, they tend to have an intuitive idea of how to make the product, or intuitive idea of how to market the product. But I see so many people have zero idea about raising capital. And that makes sense because it's not a natural thing. There's nothing about it that is at all, intuitive or sensible. So Venture Deals is a fantastic book that gives a nice overview. I forget the author's
name. Brad Feld?
But I don't remember.
I can't remember.
But yeah, if you read Venture Deals, if you've had no experience with raising capital before, Venture Deals will give you a general overview, so at least you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'll put a link.
Now you can make many mistakes thereafter.
I'll put a link in the show notes for anybody who wants to check that out. That's really good stuff, man. You've got my dream job. You've built my dream job. I've been a long time fascination with coming up with some kind of product, inventing some kind of thing. So I guess I'm a founder in search of a product and a market at the moment. So I'm very early in the stages. This has been really cool. Honestly, I think that the whole story kind of pitches your product for you. But is there any last words about why you feel like people should run out and grab this thing? I'm already sold on it, man. I want to get this thing.
I mean, look, just floss the ones you want to keep.
There you go. There it is.
One thing I will say about the dream job, though, is my great uncle is actually the inventor of the flexi straw.
The flexi straw, like the literal.
Yeah, the literal flexi straw. Joseph Freeman was my great uncle on my mother's side, and sorry, on my father's side.
Okay.
And my father would tell a story about, asked, why did you become it? He invented a lot of other things too. Some of which was like a little ahead of his time, trying to do some like 3D film stuff in the 20s. But he asked him, like, why are you an inventor? And he's like, well, it beats working. And as someone who started 2 companies trying to bring inventions to products, I mean, it's a lot of working to beat working.
Right.
But it doesn't feel like work. So maybe that's what he meant.
Yeah. I think that's the story with a lot of entrepreneurs. They don't want to have a typical boss, a real job, quote unquote. They want to have their own company, their own kind of autonomy. And then you get into starting a business like, oh, I have 20 jobs now. Okay, cool.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, you also have a lot more bosses because every customer is your boss now.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
good luck.
Yep. Well, thanks so much for sharing your time with us, Eli, and everybody listening, go check this out, Instafloss.com. I'm definitely going to check it out. And we'll see everybody next time on the First Customers Podcast.
All right. Thank you.
Later.